3, 2, 1. What's going on, everyone? You're watching Ash on Comics. This is the still unnamed indie comic show with me, Ash, and my wonderful co-host, partner in crime, Skip and Tosh. How you doing, Skip?
I'm doing real good, man. Doing real good. You know, it's been the normal 2 weeks since we've talked about, some books, some of these really cool indie books. And I've been reading a crap ton. So, man, like always, looking forward to this night. I'm happy to have everybody in the chat. Happy to have everybody who listens on audio after the fact join us on this indie comics voyage.
Yeah, me too, man. This is definitely of all the stuff I do on YouTube or whatever, this is the thing I look forward to the most. It's really a pleasure to do this with you. I'm glad that you continue to put up with my shenanigans.
A worthy sacrifice.
Yeah.
A worthy sacrifice.
Thanks, man, friend. So just for the audience, people listening in, what we got in store for tonight. This show is still evolving, right? It's a celebration of indie comics. It's basically a show designed to just be enthusiastic and geek out about indie books that we're reading. It's centered around current books that both Skip and I share, which are currently DECORUM and Firepower. And we're hoping that list is going to expand more as more books come out and things like that. And we both find things that we're both really into. Unfortunately, DECORUM doesn't come out exactly once a month. Firepower ships pretty good. So there's going to be times where we're like, oh, we don't have. So this is a book that Skip is reading. This is, what you see on the screenshot here is Blade Runner at 2019. It's a book that I've been really into. Skip got into it, and we figured this would be something to talk about for this particular show. And it's got a new series that's about to start up in January. So that might make the list. Talk to you guys about it. And then, of course, as always, the second part of our show is the ongoing saga East of West that Skip turned me on to, as well as other people that are in the audience. People like Jimmy. I don't want to leave him out of the loop there because he'll feel a little down on himself. But so this is a book that I've been reading. We're going to talk about that book. And then afterwards, we're going to talk with you guys in the audience about any other books you're reading, or maybe I'm reading, or Skip, whatever. We'll go on that. So just so everyone knows what we're doing today, Blade Runner, man, is a book I never thought I was going to read. How did you come across reading this book?
Actually, very much the way that you did. Our good buddy over at Thinking Critical, our homie Wes over there, caught wind of it and was ranting and raving about it. Had told me many times, and of course, I don't know what it is. I'm so accepting of people giving me recommendations, but when it comes to Wes, I'm super hard-headed, and it takes me way longer to get into it. So naturally, I was being a idiot and not reading it. And finally, the idea and the desire for us to work together came to fruition with the currently unnamed indie comic show. And you said you were reading it, and I was like, all right, well, now I got to read it. And sure enough, man, I was very, very happy that I did. Blade Runner being one of my favorite movies, period. And when I was growing up, one of the first cyberpunk themed pieces of media that I saw. It's cool to have it kind of come back around like this with my current love for comics. And now we get to talk about it tonight, man. It's exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I'm typically of the persuasion of I don't like to read licensed material.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel like it's just an inferior thing. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I've read just a small smidgen pinch, if you will, of Star Wars comics. I just want to stick with whatever the cream, whatever the main thing is. I don't read. I have read a couple of Terminator comics, but you know what I'm saying? Like I don't I don't read any of the Transformers stuff. I don't read G.I. Joe. And this is not a slight to anyone who does like that stuff at all. I'm not saying that that's dumb and you shouldn't like those things, but for me, it's never worked well. I just stay away. And so when Blade Runner came out, I'm like, oh, I love Blade Runner. I was high on the new movie 2049, which I like. I like it much more than the original, even.
Oh wow!
Yes, I do. I'm gonna admit something to you, Skip. I'm not a huge fan of the original Blade Runner. I know
I did not know this. This is news to me right now.
I like it. I respect it. It's been influential on me. It's one of the things that's piqued my interest, got me into like cyberpunk and stuff. But
right.
As a film itself, I think it runs very slowly. It kind of plods along. It's one of those movies that I could admire. Ridley Scott's one of my favorite directors of all time.
Definitely.
It's a masterpiece of like cinematic like film, but just the story and how it unfolds, I'm just like, whew, that's a little bit of a chore to get through. So it's just one of those things. I don't hate it. It's not like I'm against it. It's a movie that I want to love. I watch it and I go, this is so cool. I should love it way more than I do. But when 2049 came out, I walked out of that theater blown away.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's so good. So good.
So anyways,
good sequel.
Sorry. I don't know how to shut up. Skip has this gift of being concise and getting right to the point. I don't. So please forgive me. But my whole point on this was just to say that when this comic came out, I was like, oh, I'm high on it's a comic by Titan. It's probably going to be crappy. Just move along. Nothing to see here. And then Wes was just like, it's so good. It's the best comic. And I was like, really? A Titan comic? Blade Runner with some chick on the cover? What are you talking about? So, with that all said, Skip, why don't you tell us what this book's all about? Introduce it to us, the audience. And by the way, we're going to probably spoil some of this book. Well, I don't know how much we're going to spoil, but anyone listening in who hasn't read it and they're like, I don't want to. We figure if 12 issues are out by now and you haven't checked it out, you may not care. But just as a fair warning to anyone listening, Skip, tell us what this book's about and kind of give us the rundown of the story so we can talk about it.
Absolutely. Really interesting premise. Kind of caught me off guard. And kind of like you, I had some reservations at the start, but we come along to the main protagonist, whose name is oddly enough nicknamed Ash. Anna Ashika, or Anna Ashina, excuse me, is her full name. It's cool. Kind of tells a little bit of a dual storyline. Her growing up, she grew up with motherless. Only had her mother for a little while. Was mostly raised by her grandmother, and kind of taught to, hey, we're at the bottom. We're not rich. We're lower class. We got to scrape and scrap to get what we want. And also, unfortunately, the lessons of how sometimes when you're at the bottom, the people above you keep your foot on their neck. So of course they got a little meal shack, and some corrupt police officer comes and orders some food and turns away and, basically says like, this is how things work. You do this for us and we look away at the fact that you don't have the proper business license and whatnot. Oddly enough, though, Ash grows up later to actually come into law enforcement. She's a part of LAPD, and she is a hired Blade Runner for them. So as she's going around and doing some jobs, a job gets thrown into her lap by her superior, her boss. Pretty much, there's been a kidnapping or what appears to be a kidnapping, mostly a disappearance of a top scientist / board member at the Tyrell Company. For those of us who have some familiarity with Blade Runner, for the ones that don't, the Tyrell Company, founded by Eldon Tyrell, was the company that actually makes the replicants, the lifelike androids, so to speak, that populate the world. And within this world, the replicants do basically a lot of the jobs that the humans don't want to do. But of course, something had happened. One went rogue, killed someone, and off on another colony. And from there, they were all outlawed to be from being on the main world, the main Earth, and obviously, especially in LA City. So with this disappearance that Ash is now put on the case, on as she goes through it, she starts to realize that something's not right. Come to find out, as she's going through her detective work, she's getting conflicting stories as she's running down replicants and humans alike, and ultimately unravels the fact that it was really the wife who left with the child, and it was because supposedly the husband was going to do something to the daughter, basically let her be experimented on. But with conflicting stories, ultimately Ash gets the girl, finds the path, and finds out that the mother and the girl are on this planet. They had escaped and went south. Excuse me, not a planet. This island where or this place where only replicants can go. And through there is like an underground railroad for replicants, for these androids, where eventually they wanted to land on this island. And of course, the father is in hot pursuit, the one that works at the court. Ultimately, they land on the island and find out that it's inhabited by other replicants. But that doesn't stop them. So they go there. Of course, the mother sacrifices herself so that way Ash and Cleo, the young girl, can get away. And the only place that they can go is in outer space, and that's the end of part 3 out of the 12. So that's the first 4 books. Second 4, I'll wrap it up quickly. Basically, they go out to space. It's 2026 now instead of 2019. Come to find out that like replicants are kind of running rogue, and they're kind of going and like doing hits on other colonies out there and trying to free some of the replicants. At this time, Ash and Cleo are disguised as a little boy and a woman in a wheelchair to kind of hide the fact that Ash had a disability the whole time and she had to use this back brace. So they're used to her walking. So if anyone's on the trail and sees someone's in a wheelchair, maybe they'll look the other way and get off their scent. We do a whole dance of them, of course. Uh, uh, there was a hit that happened at one of the facilities. They got separated. Ash stayed alive but gets caught. And when she's interrogated, she gets interrogated by another Blade Runner, which was a super, super, super cool antagonist to put in the story. The Blade Runner's name is Hythe. So Hythe, basically, once she runs the test and gives her the void comp test, which I thought was a really cool throwback to the original story. And one of the first scenes that we see in the Blade Runner movie, Ash passes the void comp test. Obviously, she's a human, and Hythe basically tells her, like, hey, you're going to work with me. We're going to find the girl together. And they work together, and eventually Ash, or the little girl Cleo, is on her own journey as she's basically running with the team of replicants to get to a safer place. But one replicant boy wants to stay with her, kind of wants to see things through. So they do. Ultimately, their paths collide again. And when their paths do collide, we come to find out that Hythe does not work for the police department. She actually works for the husband. She actually works for the wife. The wife had actually hired her. The wife is still alive. Her replicant information had been passed into another body. And once we find that out, of course, that's basically the end of book 8. Everybody kind of comes back to Earth because they are going to come back around, and ultimately, Ash sends the mother and Cleo, the daughter, away, so they can't be experimented on because the girl has some DNA that can basically extend replicant life. They get sent off. Ash goes back to Earth to hunt down the father because she wants to end things. And when she gets back to Earth, she finds the father, and ultimately he has he went away to kind of do like a little trick where, like, I'm hiding, come find me. Oh, you come find me? I was really trying to hunt you. And at that point, Ash is basically, she's kind of outnumbered. Her old boss, you don't want to help her out, don't want to do anything for her anymore. Once she gets apprehended, she like I said, the quarters are kind of closing in on her, and right pretty much when she's about to be toast, trying to go after the husband, and him having a whole group of Hythes, that Blade Runner that was basically hired her for the job and kind of took her along to find her. The mother and Cleo come back and kind of ultimately that's kind of where I think that's where we're at, like halfway through chapter 11, or excuse me, chapter 12, issue 12. I said chapter 12. I was doing a lot of reading, but that'll kind of catch you up to where we're at now.
All right. So, did you go through the 12th issue on that synopsis?
No, not well. Did I go through? I might. You know what? I might have gone through the 12.
You kind of did.
If I did, I apologize.
I wasn't quite sure, but that's fine. I got a screen. I was just trying to throw up some imagery from the books while you were talking. You can see here. It's what was his name? The husband was Elwyn or Selwyn.
Selwyn is Selwyn is his name. Their last name.
And he made a deal with the Tyrell Corporation, which is the company that made the replicants. And the deal was they make the perfect replicant of his wife, who's dead, and they get the daughter for their own genetic experiments and things like that. And so this guy, he's kind of an antagonist, and here's the scene with the multiple highs. And I thought that was a really cool spin.
Yes.
That there was a Blade Runner, was the replicant Blade Runner. This book brings so much originality to the Blade Runner universe, but yet makes it feel completely part of the Blade Runner universe.
Definitely.
If you read this book, you don't necessarily need to be a Blade Runner fan. If you just like detective noir stories, I think this book will be for you. It's cleverly written. It's almost like a little mini trilogy. When you read all 12 issues, it feels like you just kind of watched a Blade Runner movie. I think all of this could have just fit into a Blade Runner movie. But each 4 issues is its own kind of little chapter, I guess. Like the first 4 is the story of where you reveal and you figure out who the girl is and what's not, and Ash escapes. She goes off into space, and then in the next 4 issues, it takes place like 6 years later, and she's in space. So it feels like a next chapter of a movie, it's a sequel movie. And then then on the third 4-issue arc, she comes back to Earth, and I felt like the way that this was structured is something that I'm not used to in comics. You can tell that the main writer, which by the way, the main guy who writes this comic, Michael Green, he was one of the writers of Blade Runner 2049. So this very much has an authentic feel for that part. And this series, if you are a fan like myself and Skip of the movies, even though this takes place much before 2049, the things that are in this story feel very connected and paramount to what the story of 2049 is about. And I don't want to spoil 2049 for anyone, because there's some big spoilers in that movie, but some of the things that this book touches on and reveals kind of serve to help explain some of the not that you need to read this book to understand 2049, but when you see the movie, you're like, oh, this is kind of where that started, or so forth. And it sucks. I have to kind of talk around the subject because I don't want to spoil anything. But what did you think about the main character, Ash?
Ash was part of what pulled me in so quickly to it. I liked that she wasn't perfect. She had some flaws. It always makes it feel a little more believable when they're not perfect and they do have flaws. They have obstacles that are in their way, from just achieving what they want to do and doing their job. So her seeing that she had the, basically a disability, she had that weak spine and she needed the assistance of that electronic back brace. So that way she could even work, because if she had the disability, and it was talking about earlier on in the first chapter, the first 4 books, how if the department had known then they wouldn't let her take a lot of the jobs that she did. So she hid her disability from them while doing the best work in her field for the LAPD. So I thought that was really cool. I really appreciated that. And I appreciated the fact that she had a bit of her own trauma in her life, growing up motherless, being raised by her grandmother, and seeing some corruption in the world at an early age. It kind of shaped her worldview. She's a little rough. She doesn't do things by the numbers. She's got her own beat that she walks to. She has her own methods for getting the job done, and she's got her own morality that she clings to, and that's kind of what put her at a crossroads that sent her down such an interesting trip. But how did you feel about Ash? What are some of the things that stuck out to you about her?
Well, before I go into that, I wanted to kind of put a disclaimer because I think it's relevant to my feelings. One of the things when I was going to start reading this book, and kind of what kept me away, and I want to admit it's going to sound a little sexist, but I was like, I kind of rolled my eyes because of today's political climate and the whole culture thing. I was like, oh, look, they made a Blade Runner, and of course it's a woman Blade Runner. Like I played like the whole stereotypes, like it played into my own biases and stuff. And so I was like, oh gosh. But then when I finally was convinced to sit down and read the book, within the first issue, I was like, oh damn, this chick's awesome. Like, because of that, she's not perfect. She's got these flaws. And aside from some little quirks throughout the book where they constantly say like, oh, she's the best Blade Runner that ever was, that being aside, she actually is a really like grounded character. She's got these problems. I like how she had to hide her disability from the police. Like, one, she never takes off her coat because she's afraid. She lives in debt because she had to, pay for this super expensive cybernetic surgery that she has. And she pays off this debt by like harvesting the organs of replicants. So
Skin jobs.
Yeah. And you can, right there, you see like, she's not some idyllic princess. Like she's got some moral issues that she's kind of pushing to the side for her own survival or whatever. And I love this story that with this girl that she ends up having to save, because it brings out the strength of a woman character the way that I don't see utilized quite enough. And that's the strength of femininity. We see Ash, those maternal instincts kick in, and she decides, she doesn't say, I'm going to turn over a new leaf. It's not like that quaint and simple, but she immediately is like, this is what I got to do. This is what I should be doing. Screw this existence with these, corrupt politicians and the police and doing all this stuff. This girl has to be protected. And she takes this girl off into space and she leaves everything behind. And to me, that's way more heroic and powerful for a character than just watching her like beat people up, like a lot of stuff we're used to. She takes this girl under her wing and becomes her mother in all sense of the word. And even when you see in the second chapter, and I'm going to call each 4-arc-ish piece a chapter, just for the clarification of that. We see in the second chapter where they're in space and the little girl is not grown up, but she's like, what, 12 or something at this point. And she's under this identity of the rabbit, and she's got a shaved head and she's pretending to be a boy because they're on the run. And so, but she's super streetwise. And so she like runs the replicants on this like mining colony because she's like knows how to like basically lead them. Like she's smart, and everyone's like, oh, we follow her and we do good, And so, but she's like this little gangster, and it's so cool like how this character is. And because of that though, this character, she starts losing a sense of her humanity and forgetting like all the things that Ash has done for her and sacrificed. And she starts having this like, what you see with mother-daughter relationships that struggle for independence and I don't need you. And I was like, this is just so cleverly written. And, I'm so used to like reading, I hate to say, but like stories with female characters where they're just written kind of like man stories. Like, oh, we gotta fight and beat people. Like, like this was like, oh, finally you get like the power. Like there's more femininity I think is a beautiful thing, and
Definitely.
as a man, I admire these things because I don't have them. Like
Right.
I look up and go, man, this is why women are so awesome, because they have these strengths and these feelings and do this stuff. And so this character Ash, she makes sacrifices that feel fitting to her role in the story, but also to her gender, to everything. The little girl feels real, and then they come to satisfying conclusions when the story wraps up, and then the real mother, the biological mother, gets back involved. I liked this. I mean, it's not just because her character's named Ash. I mean, I think that's cool too. But,
that doesn't hurt.
It's actually cool. I mean, if she was a dumb character, I'd be like, great, she has the Ash name. But I love it. I love that they were able to make a really cool Blade Runner story that felt like a completely different Blade Runner. And that's one of the things I respected real quick just about 2049 is, they introduce, I forget the actor's name, but the new Blade Runner character that's.
Oh yeah, I forget the character's name.
The character's
that's
name is
Ryan
Kay.
Gosling is that. The character's name is Kay. Ryan Gosling is the actor.
Yeah, so Ryan Gosling is introduced, and he's not just a Deckard clone, right? That would have been so typical Hollywood of just be like, make him like Deckard but younger, but just more of the same.
Yeah, exactly.
They made a different thing, and the same thing with Ash here too. Is like she doesn't feel like Deckard or Kay, and she has her own. Kay had his issues that were different than Deckard's. Ash has her issues that are different than both of them, but they all feel like they belong in this Blade Runner world.
Yep.
And then you get to see something you've never seen in either Blade Runner movie. They go to space.
Yeah.
I had forgotten when I started reading this book, because 2049 doesn't really talk about it or anything, but I forgot about in the first movie, they talked about how the replicants were sent off to do jobs in space. It's one of the primary things that they were created to do, because space is harsh.
Right.
And,
yeah, the off-world colonies.
Yeah, the off-world colonies. And it's only one of those, it's like the Clone Wars and Star Wars, like you're like, what's the Clone Wars? Like in the original movie. Right. They just mention it. But this book kind of explores it, and you get to go to the off-world colonies, and you're like, that's kind of cool. Like, we're probably never going to get another Blade Runner movie, so getting this comic written by the guy who wrote 2049, I think he might have been involved on the first one too, but don't quote me, I have to look that up. It just feels authentic, and it's well done, and I couldn't be happier with what I'm getting, and I'm really looking forward to the next series, which this is the end of this particular run under the name 2019. So there's a 12-issue arc, but starting in January, there's going to be Blade Runner 2029, which is it's going to pick up off of this. So if you want a jumping on point, if you weren't reading it, maybe pick up the trade paperbacks and then jump in on 2029. I'm absolutely going to be picking up 2029. What about you?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be picking up 2029, and they have the other series too, Blade Runner Origins, which is kind of going to be more as 2029 continues the story of Ash. The Origins is actually going to tell more of the origins of Blade Runners and how they kind of came to be, and I'm very much interested in that. So I'll probably be doing a dual read of a double helping of Blade Runner as those series roll out.
So I just saw that on the Comixology as I was throwing up graphics, and I have that on the screen right now. I did not know anything about this. This is brand new to me. Says Blade Runner Origins #1, Los Angeles 2009, uncover the story behind the first Blade Runners. Is this going to be an ongoing, or is this a one-shot, or do you know any more about it?
As far as I know, it's an ongoing. I don't believe it's a one-shot, and I believe that's part of the reason, from my understanding, why the original writer won't continue on with the 2029 book is only going to help with the first issue, because I believe they're going to have them focus, Mike Johnson focus on writing the Blade Runner Origins series.
Yeah, it says here that Mike Johnson is co-writing the Blade Runner Origins, and then Michael Green is credited on the first issue of 2029. I don't really know much more going forward, but this series was so strong for me that it's earned my attention for the next one. I'm like, okay. Before I was like, I don't know about this. And then you won me over. So now, thumbs up. I'm going to dive in. I'm going to give you a solid chance to keep my attention. You've earned it, in my opinion. Bravo to Titan. If you guys are apprehensive, if you're like me and you're like, I don't really like licensed stuff, stuff based on movies or whatever, I'm there with you. I'm one of those people. This is a good book, and you don't have to. It helps if you're a Blade Runner fan. It helps because that lore, it's the world building and everything, that's just it's contributing. One of the things I love, I talk a lot about continuity when I talk about mainstream comics and stuff. This book feels like it keeps the continuity of the movies and stuff. It doesn't feel like it goes off onto some far, weird territory that you're like, what is this?
Right.
Like it feels like this could have been a third Blade Runner movie. Like it doesn't contradict anything and go, that's not how Blade Runner is. Like, and it's good. I think even if you don't like it though, but you just like good detective action, crime noir type stories, this is that type of story. It starts off as a missing persons thing. Got to find out where that person is. Then you start seeing that there's some underhanded motives about who's hiring who to do what, why they're doing it. Then characters have to make hard choices to do things. And then ultimately, by the third chapter, the characters are basically at a fork in the road of like, do they continue on with what they've been doing their whole life? Or do they make a radical paradigm shift and change things forever? That's... I could just talk a lot about this book. I feel like I'm just going to monopolize the time. Anything more that you want to add on this?
Last thing I say, the only thing, and it's interesting, there's a very specific reason for what I'm about to say. There was something within this book that did make it slightly different, especially from the first Blade Runner movie, that I really enjoy. But there's multiple versions of the first Blade Runner movie. If you guys are familiar with it, there's one that we know as the main release. It is the theatrical version of the film. And with that, there's a lot of narration that happens. So as much as this is a detective story, kind of very similar to the book, there was action when there needed to be, but there wasn't just like all this fighting and all this crazy stuff. There was a lot of detective work, a lot of questioning, a lot of following up on clues, a lot of, deciphering things. So I love how those two things match, but there's so much dialogue in here, which is so natural, obviously, for a visual medium and for a comic book. But the second version of the Blade Runner movie, which is actually the director's cut, Ridley Scott had a cut where he wanted the movie to go on without that type of narration in it. And the studio who released the movie fought back against it. They kind of went around, had some additional dialogue added, brought back. Wow. I'm really, name's on the tip of my tongue. The actor, Decker.
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford. Brought back Harrison Ford behind Ridley Scott's back and had him lay down all this dialogue. And then that's the theatrical cut that came out. So later on down the line, Ridley Scott did get to release a director's cut, and it had no dialogue. And that actually made the movie feel considerably different. The dialogue that was added, all of the ad libs and whatnot, kind of made it feel almost made it feel like a parody of noir crime films, noir detective films, as opposed to authentic ones. And so with that removed, it changed it. So me coming into this with my favorite version being the one that has none, and then getting to hear all of her internal thoughts and dialogues, it was something that at first I was like, this kind of reminds me more of like the theatrical cut, and the one that I don't like, the one that I avoid for pretty much at all costs. But as things went on, the writer did such a great job with the dialogue, keeping it concise, keeping it so much at the center of the character, that I think it was by the third, about the third issue. I didn't mind it, and I actually looked forward to it because I really liked what it revealed about Ash, about the character of Ash, and about the internal battles and whatnot that she faces. So it was very interesting how those two things, kind of one of the dialogue at first kind of spun me, and then after the fact, I was kind of in for it. So I just love how, like you said, Ash, it feels like it's completely a valid chapter in the book of this world of Blade Runner that we live in, and I'm so happy that they did it. The way that it landed too was really well. I really like the ending. I like how after the apex of the story and what the twist was and everything, how we came down, kind of showed Ash where she was, and they did it in a way where it completely set up, another one to come. And that's the one that we hope you guys will end up picking up, because chances are we'll be talking about it on a distant episode of the Unnamed Indie Comic Book Show.
Well said, man. I don't think I could say that any better. Well, I know I couldn't say it any better. My only last thing that I want to say about this Blade Runner 2019, I was going to shock the world here. This book is better than the original Blade Runner movie, in my opinion. Well, I mean, let me pull back a little bit. I enjoyed this book better than the original Blade Runner movie.
I can see that, especially as I know something that you haven't revealed to everybody else yet. You haven't seen the Ridley Scott director's cut.
That's true.
Of the original Blade Runner movie.
You've exposed me. It's true. I have never seen the. Well, there's actually more than one director's cut. I believe there are like four
there's multiple
cuts of Blade Runner.
Yes.
The one that I'm looking to see is the final cut. But regardless, you are correct. I have not seen any of the director cut versions with no narration. I've only ever seen the movie with its narration, which I'll also be fair and be honest, transparent. I never had a problem with the voiceover. When people mention it to me and say it's cheesy and it doesn't, I go, now that I think about it, I see the point. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to be like, no, it needs it. Like, I don't feel like I'm not invested in it by any means. But it never occurred to me until people brought it to my attention. And then I was like, oh, well, me being the film snob that I am, I'm like, well, if Ridley Scott didn't want it this way, then I want to see it the way he wants it. So it's on a wish list for me to buy. Like, I've been meaning to. It's just one of those things I'm like, I gotta buy this movie that I don't really like watching that much, but I want to have it because I respect it. And I do love things about it. Obviously, I want more Blade Runner stories. So obviously I love Blade Runner, the world that they made. Like I said, it's just that particular story runs a little slow. And I think it's also a product of the time. That movie, I think, came out in 1984, before movies were changed forever when James Cameron came around and changed how we paced movies. So, that might be it too. But this book's great. I hope you guys have read it. I hope we're just talking to people who are like nodding their heads and going, yes, you guys know. And to those of you that don't, give this a try. It's 3 trade paperbacks. If you haven't got the singles, you can get them out there. I reread the whole series today for the show. I was going to sit down and just catch up. I had a few issues to catch up through 12. And I was like, you know what? Nope. I'm going to sit from the beginning, and I had no problem. Like, I didn't feel like, oh, I'm trudging through. Like, I already know what happens. Like, it was just as good the second time. I was like, oh, and I got to actually appreciate how the scenes transitioned, how the artist how the writer was blocking it into 3 separate sub stories and these character arcs, and how each chapter kind of feels like you could chapter 1 has its own beginning, middle, and end, but then chapters 1, 2, and 3 are also a beginning, middle, and an end in and of themselves. So you're just like, I really enjoyed this. This is a book that I'm going to come back to periodically again and again and reread, because I just enjoyed the story and the characters that much.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well,
so now we've gone through our main comic of the day. Where are we on to next? What's the next thing we're doing?
We are picking up where we left off 2 weeks ago in the saga of East of West. We are taking it show by show as of right now. Last week we covered volume 1. Hopefully, everybody that listened last week either had already read it, and if you didn't, hopefully you read it and got caught up, and hopefully you grabbed volume 2 as well, because that is exactly what we are getting ready to talk about. For those, I'm not going to rehash the whole last volume, but I will explain the concept quickly of the East of West story. Essentially, what has happened is in this world, it is right around the Civil War. Armageddon has started. The trumpets have sounded. The four horsemen, or a version of, I should say, a version of the four horsemen from Revelation have come down to the earth. But one of the other horsemen, which is Death, betrays the other three, stops Armageddon, and in doing so, those events kind of roll into some additional quote unquote scripture from this time, from this world, and now those things are playing out. We everybody knows that the divine exists, and there is a select group of each individual section of the United States that has now been fractured because of Armageddon, and they have all agreed that they are the chosen from these additional new scriptures called the Message, and it is their duty to carry out the end of the world and help the other three horsemen bring about Armageddon. And Death had a wife, and he thought she was dead, and found out that his wife is alive. And after pursuing that and seeing that she has a loyalty to her kingdom, she has to lead them through this whole Armageddon thing. Death also finds out that their son is still alive, so he leaves his wife to lead her nation as he goes and tries to find their son and bring their son back so they can be a family unit again. And that is where we start off in East of West Volume 2. My man Ash.
Oh, wow. Put me on the spot here. I'm not sure how we want to. Are we going to synopsize the volume 2?
I say we just talk through. It. I mean, there's some really interesting things that happen. So much had happened. But let's just kind of start off with your thoughts, because you had heard so much about this book from other people. Like you said, Jimmy has talked about it. Other people, of course, Jonathan Hickman being a really big name. But I mean, before all of this, let's be very clear. He had a track record and whatnot at Marvel, and had done Secret Wars, 2015 Secret Wars, went away, came back to do Hawks and Pox, and his name was just, crazy. It was hotcakes. But this is a very different story from Hawks and Pox, which, was very hot earlier on. And of course, Dawn of X is kind of fizzling out, but a completely different story. You read volume 1, you let us know last time, for the people that didn't catch last show, you kind of weren't sure about it. You were interested, but you wasn't sure if you liked it. And then shortly on, I think you said about halfway through issue 3, you kind of really caught on, and then you wrote it the rest of the way out. How's your overall feelings after completing volume 2?
Well, it was the 5th issue, which was the last issue of the volume, that really kind of like tied it together for me. Those first 4 issues, I was like, what the heck am I reading here? and then the 5th issue, it didn't really explain what the hell am I reading, but it made me feel like, oh, you're reading something. It grabbed my attention and said, okay, I need to know what goes on more. Volume 2 slipped back a little bit at first, but then went back. One of the things I really liked about volume 2 is it seemed to kind of, I don't want to say like the word coast feels a little bit negative. I don't mean that, but I felt like it eased off the gas a little bit and said, okay, we catapulted this series. It's going. We gave our first big kind of hook going on, and now we're going to take our time and deal with some of the characters that we introduced. You got to see them, but
Right.
characters like John Freeman was
Yep.
one. We got to see more about the Texas Ranger guy. We get to see more
Yeah.
about the president and the madam. I forget what her name. A lot of these characters, I forget their names.
Madame LeVay, Belle Solomon was the one who was part of the Chosen but belonged to the Ranger Nation, and then John Freeman was one of the Chosen that we did already see, and then he is a prince in the New Orleans Kingdom.
Yeah, so we got a lot of
Mm.
character development books
Yeah.
that were
Mhm.
that were really cool. Actually, I really appreciated that because these were characters that Hickman in the previous volume sort of flashed at you, and he was like, "Boom, here's this guy," and "Boom, here's this guy," and you're reading the book, and you're like, "These guys are going to be important," like, but I don't really remember who they are, and so now the book is kind of leveling off. It's like a cruising. Yeah, that's what it is. Like the first volume felt like a plane. You're on a plane and you're climbing, and now we're at cruising altitude, and so it's like, okay, you can move about the cabin. And
Right. A good way to describe it. Yeah.
and so we're getting some of these issues, and it really helped bring us into some of these characters. And this is something that I've not read a lot of Hickman, so
Mhm.
forgive me for those of you in the audience who are like, Hickman, disciples.
Mm.
I don't know that, but the Hickman that I have read, he hasn't really turned me on with his amazing characterization. Like,
Mhm.
he's really impressed me with his deep, intricate plotting and his
Yeah.
out of this world ideas where you're just like, oh my gosh, who comes up with this stuff? That's
Right.
awesome. Like, your mind gets blown. I love that. But his characters have always, what little I've read, have always felt very clinical to me. Just kind of like, okay, he's just whatever. But this book, I feel these characters feel like people. I feel their emotions. I feel when I read the dialogue boxes, I don't feel like it's just the same people in different word balloons. Like,
Right.
they feel all different. And I love when you come up, like there's a scene where Death is on this journey he's trying to find his son, and he's kind of on this journey to get clues and stuff, and they go and they descend into this lake. And first that he talks to the lake itself, and it's got its own personality, and then you get to meet this character called the Oracle. And what I love is I feel as I'm reading this book that these are characters in Hickman's minds that is really fleshed out.
Yeah.
I don't know who this character is, but the characters talk to each other as if there's tons of backstory that he's already written, and it shows. And as someone like I talk about all the time, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I talk, one of the things that I love that Lucas did was he wrote this prequel story, just an outline. But when you see Star Wars and you see the characters interact, and Luke's talking to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Obi-Wan's talking about Luke's father as if there was a real story that existed, and because the story did exist, and so it makes the interactions feel like grounded and like that there is history there. And I felt that way here. That's my way of trying to give Hickman some props. That Oracle, I was like, oh man, there's something here. And now, because I know that I don't just believe he's writing dialogue like, oh, I'll figure something out later. I really feel like I gotta see what's going on. There's a scene where he's walking away, or Death is threatening the Oracle, and well, maybe I should not jump too far ahead because I got the comic on screen here. But
okay, got you.
There's a scene. Oh, I will get to that scene. We'll remind you. I guess since I got the book up right here, I got the volume 2. We can see this is something I had a question for you. We get to see one of the Chosen here. They've called themselves together because they believe one of them is going to betray the other, and of course the people who are betraying are like, what makes you have that idea?
Right.
And this guy, he pulls out these two hands, and at first I was like, oh no way, that's the hands of Jian Liang, but it's not. But again, I don't think Hickman does anything without a plan. I feel like I'm not understanding the significance of what I'm seeing here. Am I supposed to, or what?
No, for the most part at this time, there's not a whole lot of assertions that you should be making. The main focus is, yeah, this is a ritual, and more so this part, kind of going along with the theme of character development. Ezra, the keeper of Armistice, is someone that we got introduced to, but we haven't seen a lot of. It's like, oh, this is just a person there. So the ritual that they pull off at this point is basically kind of showing you like almost like he's like a holy man, quote unquote, and he has access to divinations or divinity or whatever. So that was the thing more than ever. And then of course, like you were talking about, they knew that there was a mole, and basically in a way they almost divined the mole in a sense, or at least tried to, but it wasn't fully necessary, because as we know, he was given up pretty quickly by my favorite character, or my second favorite character in the book, Archibald.
Oh, Archibald's a great character.
Oh yeah.
So there's a scene here where they're, yeah, what you just said, like we think there's traitors in our midst, whatever, and they're like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And this Archibald guy, he just plays it so smooth all the time. And so finally they're like, well, we're gonna summon the beast, and when the beast touches you, he says, I hear, oh wait, actually I went too far. Where's the line? The beast will attach itself to each of us, tasting flesh, and in its consumption it will divine where each of our true loyalties lie. And it cuts over to Archibald, and he's like, how morbid. Well then, no need for that. Bell's the traitor. He's like, it's him. And you could look on Bell's face. He's like, what the hell?
You gave me up, you dirty yellow belly good for nothing. Like, I love how each character has a voice in here, and along with each character having a voice, that voice really reinforces what their character is. And that is it's been established. Archibald is looking out for numero uno.
Yep.
He really doesn't care that much about the message, nor does he really not care that much about he is just looking out for himself, and whoever he needs to play and give up, he will. So if you show him a soft, fleshy part, expect him to be driving a knife in it sometime soon if it comes down between you and him.
Yeah. So here's a scene where it's like, he's like, you son of a bitch. And then Archibald's response is just, chaos, Bell. Best be the wind. Your end is nigh. He's just like, you better be running. And, we can see the other guy summoning this beast thing. And then we go over to John Freeman, who we haven't had any real contact with at all. He's just been a dude kind of off to the side. He's been a wallflower. And this is his kind of introduction. And he has got one of my favorite lines of the whole volume. Where just one panel, he just looks over his shoulder and he's like, just thinking about it makes you too slow. And you're just like,
yeah.
Oh, damn. And you see the hand silhouetted over the gun. And it's just like Bell's face. And ba-bam, John Freeman, and Bell is a Texas Ranger. Like, he's not a slouch. He's not, and he just, because he had to think about what to do, John Freeman, but Bell gets off a shot and shoots the beast, and that's going to be important later. Because of that happens, he's able to make his getaway, and he flees, and he's talking to his ship. And he's like, prepare. And we cut over now to the past. I do believe it's the past. Well, no, this is the present. We see this little robot dog, and he sees a ship. And then we cut to the past, and there's this character that we're going to be introduced to.
One of my favorite characters in the book, but I would say my third favorite character in the book, easily.
Yeah, I don't know enough about him yet, but he's very intriguing. And I love the dog companion that rescues him. We get this flashback, and he's a Texas Ranger also. And then we cut over. We get this court scene, and Bell and his younger self. He's on trial, and it is the most corrupt of corrupt trials. The whole theme of this is that justice is a farce. all the politicians are bought off. And they even make a comment that the judges are even worse than politicians. Like, and there's a scene. I mean, the judge is like, as you can see, I have dismissed this jury. I have done so because I will be issuing my own verdict. Like the judge can just be like, go away, jury. I'm gonna. You're just like, what? There's no justice here. And Bell has this line. He's like, I object, Your Honor. And he's like, I'm about to rule, counselor. All of your objectives have been noted. They have been overruled. You're out of time, sir. Still, I object. You think you have some grounds, Mr. Solomon? Yes, I do, Your Honor. And he explains like how this guy, he's caught with the blood on him. He's got the weapons. Like, it couldn't be a more cut and dry case that this guy's the killer.
Literally red-handed.
Red-handed. You can see the smug look on the accused. Like, he's just got his leg up on the thing. And, it's just all serving to illustrate how crooked it is. And you can see the Texas lawman guy here, this got the faded look, which is a flashback. And they go to illustrate how, this guy's bad, blah, blah, blah. And then what's this Texas lawman's name? Because I'm not remembering it.
He doesn't I don't think he has one.
Okay, so I'll just call him the Texas lawman.
Yep.
He comes in with his little robot dog on his shoulder, and he's just like, mercy. And he's like, what? The judge is like, what? And the judge, eventually is like, there won't be any mercy, blah, blah, blah. Then he's just like, okay, then justice. And he's getting hauled away by the guards. He pulls their guns, shoots them. Bam, bam, just no. And he's just like, if you have no mercy for me, judge, then I ask for justice. He just shoots the judge. And he shouts again, justice. You can see the guy on the ground who's cowering. He's the murderer, And then he pulls off the judge's mask, and he basically turns himself into Judge Dredd here at this point. He looks down. What's your money gonna buy you now, son of a bitch? Didn't you hear? Weren't you listening? I'm a free man, not guilty. You say that like it's supposed to matter.
Blam! Oh, I love that scene so much, dude. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a cool scene. And then we get this flashback scene where we see the Bell and the Texas lawmen, the other Texas Rangers and stuff, and they just talk about how they went and they got rid of all the politicians and all the judges. It's just a cool little backstory that part of where Bell comes from, but also this new character where Bell has now in the present day fled to. And he's like, look, man, I need your help. And this guy's like, dude, we're retired. And he's like, and there's this, it's so much to go into. I swear, if you guys aren't reading this book, I love this issue. This is probably my favorite issue of the whole volume because it speaks,
it's so good.
It speaks so much about corruption and what Jonathan Hickman does for me in this whole series so far. It's more than just a tale of entertainment, right? I'm fine with comics just being entertainment. I don't expect more of them, and I don't ever defame them for not being more. That's fine. Sometimes I just want to read a Spider-Man issue and have a laugh and be fun. That's great. But what this book does is what so few comics are able to do, and that's be a work of art. And I don't mean like necessarily a work of fine art because of the illustrations or whatever, although that can be a thing too. I think Hickman is writing a work of art in the literary sense. There's so much that he's saying beyond just telling you an entertaining story. The commentary on here, which is about corruption, where the Texas lawman says, spend enough time with a star on your chest. Whoops, where is it? Spend enough time with the star, and you lose the ability to see people. You stop seeing them and only see their actions and the motivations behind them. You know the problem I have here, right? The things the stories you're telling. I don't think there are just 5 of these chosen. I think there's 6. And so as he's telling the story, he figures out that Ben, he's caught up. Yep. And then Ben starts confessing to him. He's like, you tell yourself it's only a little compromise, that you can use them as much as they use you. that someone has to keep a close eye on what's really going on. And then you do something that you know you shouldn't. And you know what happens? Do you know what the consequence is? Nothing. Nothing happens. So you do it again and again. It doesn't cost anything. But that thing is and again until it does cost something. But that thing is so minor, so insignificant compared to the greater cause. So I compromised over and over for years and fucking years until I lost something. Until I lost myself. Look at me however you want. I don't care anymore. But this still needs to be done. Someone has to do it. You have to do it. And so Ben right now, he's kind of coming to terms with his fate. Because he started off, this to me, thematically, there's more to it than what I'm describing. I could sit here and talk for hours on this, but this to me is Hickman kind of, in a literary sense, expounding on the idea of, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And this is what Bell represents here. He's like, I'm going to be here. I'm going to watch it. I'll be fine. And he let himself get down that river and sold himself. And by the time he realized that it was too late, and it's something I think all of us can relate to when we're by ourselves and we're being honest. And, sometimes we compromise. And, and that's where, guilty consciences come in, things like that. And Bell has a huge guilty conscience. And it's this that I believe what convinces a Texas lawman guy to be like, all right, I'm going to take the job. And Bell's like, yes, you are? And he's like, I'm going to make you a promise. When the time comes, I kill you last. It's like, damn.
Yeah.
So that, I love stories. I'm sorry. I don't really love stories of corruption, but I love when you can make a really solid commentary on corruption and you can tell that the author gets it and like where it comes from. And it's not, lesser writers just write blanket like, oh, he's bad because he just wants power, and it's just, it's very one dimensional. But these characters
very elementary.
Yeah, these characters aren't. And so far, none of these characters are really, as far as I can tell, there's no good characters here. This book almost feels like it's hell. Like it's like everyone's just trapped in hell, and it's a godless society, and there's just varying levels of evil, and everyone's like gone down the slide, and some people are trying to like claw their way back up and realizing, other people are just being like, F it, embrace it. Like the Madam President woman.
Yeah.
There's the cool scene here where Death is on his quest and he comes up to the lake and he gets crows to wake it up and so he can talk. And he makes a deal with the lake. It's really cool. This is the kind of the fantasy world building stuff that I find very entertaining as well. Like I like that this world is a world I've never seen. There's familiarity in it with being like a Western, but then there's like sci-fi, which is kind of weird to be in a Western. But then you have these fantasy elements, like he's literally talking to a lake, and then he goes down this spiraling staircase, which I guess is going into hell or something. I don't know where it's going. And Crow asks like, how far does this go? And Death responds, all the way. Like, whoa. They talk about the pilgrimages that used to be in the past that went to the Armistice area. And
that was interesting.
This was kind of interesting. What was the name of this character that built the Armistice? Ezra. So we get to see a little bit of his backstory here. He was a baby, and the Four Horsemen like basically fed him blood, and I think that's famine that raised him.
Yes.
So that's what led him to be who he is, and he's the one that erected the tower. And this whole time he's just been trying to be worthy to Famine, who he calls mother. And now he's got this arm, this beast is molded with him on his right arm. And it's like unbearable pain. He's just like, please cut it off, cut my arm off and stuff. And Famine's just like, you know, you're going to always wear this. You've made me very proud. And she's, you're just like, man, this
Right.
this is hellish world.
Part of the indoctrination process. We saw as she was growing him, you know, she would as she was reading these new, you know, scriptures, quote unquote, you know, she would always ask, you know, are you what the message demands? You know, that was basically her like negging him, like, you know, you're never, are you good enough yet? You're not good. He would always say, no, not yet, mother, you know, like, you know, I can be more. And it's so crazy that through the years, even up until he gets, you know, a mistakenly, you know, meshed with this beast thing and he's crying and begging for her to separate him from it. She does the same exact thing. And it was crazy.
So here we get the Madam President. I'm so bad with names.
Madam LeVay.
Madam LeVay.
Madam President LeVay. Yeah.
She's of the Union, one of the 7 states.
Yeah.
And she's and the Union is the one that feels the most analogous to like the U.S. as we know it of these various states. So this backstory feels a little bit the closest to home, where you could see like the protests in the streets, especially since like today. I mean, when Hickman wrote this, it wasn't 2020, but I was reading this now and I'm like, wow, that's prophetic of 2020. And so we're going to get more of her backstory, but we cut back to Death and his pilgrimage. And this is where we get to meet the Oracle, and it's a scary creature. And this is a very interesting creature too. And this is what I was talking about earlier about how I liked how you felt like there was backstory. I loved that this character could talk to Death without fear.
Yeah.
Because the Oracle sees all possible futures. And so Death couldn't threaten her because she would know if he would really carry out his threat.
Exactly.
And there was a part that we'll get to it where you know, he's like, you know, you want to meet your end right now. He's like got a gun to her head or something. And she's like, you won't do it. You know, or it's like, it's just like, I
called his bluff.
Yeah. Because she knows the future. So she's like, yeah. So death, you can't, yeah, man. She gets one up on Death and you're like, wow. So we're going back on this political story. And this was another fascinating story about Madame LeVay, about how she ascended to the presidency. And it's a time that's kind of not unlike what's happening today with all the protesting and riots, although even more extreme. And we got a bunch of little freedom fighter, you know, kids who are rebelling against society, and the president has to deal with them, and she just gets her hands dirty. We don't have enough time to really go into the detail of it, but suffice it to say, I just thought it was such another great commentary on her story. I thought it was a great commentary on the price of power.
Yeah.
And what she sells out to have power. And she makes a comment in the story. I'm not sure if I remember exactly where it is, where she talks about like freedom. Where is it? She's like, yeah, here it is. Where she's looking down, she's just gunned down all of her friends who were the resistance personally. And she kneels down and looks at her and says, now this is true freedom. See how content they seem, dying for what they believed? Do you understand now, you filthy peasant? She's like, no, I do not deal in hope because there is none. And I was just like, holy cow, because, and again, if you haven't read it, it's probably not going to sound as much, because there's a lot of context that I'm skipping. But to me, this was such a powerful commentary on the mind of authoritarians like this woman, who, I've had this philosophy for a long time that, you know, where I think, why do some people embrace freedom and liberty for all, and other people embrace like hardcore iron fist, got to lock everyone down, authoritarian. And I feel like the reason is the same for both. I think everyone truly wants to be free. I think some people believe the idea that for someone to be free, we all need to be free. That's my personal belief, is that way. But I also believe other people believe that the only people who ever really get to be free are the ones in charge. And so that's why they seek the power, because they don't believe that they'll ever be free. That libertarianism kind of is a pipe dream. And so they don't want to be a slave. So rather than be a slave, they're going to be a slave master. And so they sell themselves out. Like this woman, she sells herself to become a slave master, but she's deluded because she's not free either. In fact, there's a comment when she sells herself to the horsemen where they're like, she'll do. And then the next panel, for now. And you're like, she's
just as disposable.
Yeah. And so, but she's got her freedom now. She believes she's in power. And I like, man, that's totally how society is. Like Hickman's nailing it, but in this fantasy world, he's drawing parallels. And then we cut to John Freeman's story. And I really like this character, John Freeman. I don't know much about him yet, but he seems wildly complex. We see him, he's playing this hologram story of LaVey talking to him. He's got a woman in his bed and she's talking to him, and we find out he's a high prince. We learn that, his dad's the king. And of course the stories keep getting cut and back. We go back to death. We've talked about, and this is where death takes her price. He wants, what price are you going to ask? And she's like, I want to see. And we get this scene where her little tentacles coming out of her eyes take
so creepy.
One of Death's eyes. Yeah, it's really gross. And she's like, oh, that's better. Now about your son. And I love how the book keeps cutting back and forth. It doesn't just completely play out the story. You get a little bit of tidbit of what's going on there, and it's like, okay, cut over here. And you're like, no, I want to know more. And so we see John Freeman. Now he's hanging out at a club, and apparently he's got lots of brothers. And one of his brothers is like, I'm sorry, which one are you again? 9. I'm John Freeman the 9th, and very soon planning on being the 8th. So it's one of his younger brothers. He's a big upstart. And he's like, oh, man, listen up, 9. I just want to listen to my music. Just go away, And this kid's like, no, I'm better. I'm better than you'll ever be, blah, blah, blah. So finally he's like, all right, let's go outside. And you get this showdown. And this was a cool scene, too, because John, one of the things I liked about this character is he seems to get it. And he says to his brother, he's like, tell me, do you know what it means to be the 9th prince in a prosperous kingdom? Yeah, it means there are 8 people in front of you. Think I've been clear that they need to move. And he's just like, and this is wisdom. This is a commentary on wisdom, I think.
Yep.
And John says, no, it means you're wealthy beyond belief. And you get to live that life without any complications. You can do whatever you want, go wherever you please. You can be anything. In truth, I envy you, which is why I find this all so disappointing. You're too young and rich to be covetous, brother. So let this be a lesson. And I was like, oh my God, it's another nail on the head. The people who covet the most are the people that have the most.
Oh yeah.
Right? If you look in the world and you want to find people that are content, it's always poor people. You will not find, you want to find a real content person, you need to leave America. You can go in some of the seedy parts of Africa, and you see people that, they got to walk 20 miles just to get some water, but they live a content life. Now, not all of them do. I mean, some of them have some unhappy life, but I'm saying, like, meanwhile, you go to America and people are like bitching because they can't get their PlayStation 5 on day one. Right. I'm hearing stories about how Amazon drivers are stealing the PlayStations from the deliveries. Crazy. And I'm just like, Jesus, like, do we not have enough? No, we're not. The more you get, the more you want. But what I want to be clear about my assessment and my opinions on this book, why I love it so much, is because I never, not one single time for a half of a second, do I ever feel Hickman is preaching to me.
Right.
Not once. I just feel like he's telling a human story about human emotions, psychology, sociology. He's never once preaching to me like, this is how the world should be. This is how you should, like, never. He's just telling story. And all these people are bad. He's never even once saying, like, be like this guy. No, they're all like, and John, he just goes and murders people. And this is a really cool scene too, where he's just like, let this be a lesson. And he's like, bam, bam, shoots behind the back, shoots the hand off his brother. And he's like, remember what I taught you to hear today. Or when I become king, there will be one less prince in the court. And that was a cool scene. And it's just, this book is just made up of these over and over. He cuts to the scene with his dad. You get to meet his dad, the king, and we get this story. And it's just, like I said, I could just go on for hours. And you asked me what I thought about this book versus volume 1. And I have to say, what I think is, volume 1, I didn't understand what I was reading. Volume 2, I don't necessarily understand what I'm reading, but I don't feel as lost. I feel like the picture's coming in a little clearer. I'm not as confused. As you can tell, I have a lot more to talk about on this episode versus last episode, because it's starting to make more sense, and I feel like there's more to it. I feel definitely when I talk to you about it, or other people, you've read the whole thing through more than once. And
this is like my 5th time.
Right. So I feel like this is going to be a book that I'm going to get more out of when I come back again and read it through, having this first introduction to it, and like, okay, now I kind of understand how the pieces go together. Now when I read it again, it's going to make even more sense, and I'm going to see more of it than I did.
Definitely.
But this first time, it's a bit of a struggle, but I like the struggle. I love that this book doesn't hold my hand.
Yeah.
I love that it forces me to try to think about what I'm seeing. And this world is so creative that even when it's sometimes confusing, I don't care, because I'm caught up with these characters and what this world's all about and what's going to happen next. We get this great scene with the shaman guy. What was his name from the Indian nation?
Shaveo.
Shaveo. So Death's pilgrimage takes him to Shaveo because that's where the oracle sent him, and he confronts him. And
the country of death is what it was called, I believe.
Yeah. And so we find out that he is Wolf's father.
He's Wolf's father, yeah.
And here's the thing I want to ask for you, and obviously whether or not this will be a spoiler, so you can choose how to answer appropriately, but there's a part in this book where they show up, and where is it? Is it here? Where? That's right. Where is it? Yeah, okay, so Death shows up, and he's talking to him, and he's demanding his thing, and he's like, your real enemy is yourself. I have no quarrel with you. And Death says, well, I beg to fucking differ. And then he just kind of looks to the side. And he's like, oh, if you so choose. And he's like, oh, I see you, Crow, still posing as man. And immediately some bells started going off. Because I've been wondering the whole time why she's black and he's white.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some significance there, like same to deal with why Death is now white instead of black. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that at first when I read that, I'm like, okay, so she's some sort of spirit thing posing as a man. That makes sense. But then when I find out that Wolf is actually a man posing as a spirit, I'm like, oh, wait a second. So is Crow not human?
Neither of them are technically. Neither Wolf nor Crow are actually human, but I think it happened in reverse. I'm trying to.
You don't. If you say it's gonna be revealed later, that's fine. This is
Well,
just more of
it doesn't fully get revealed later.
okay.
Like it doesn't fully, but like from what I got from reading on, and what I'm about to say won't spoil anything. I think Crow started off more as a crow, and I think Wolf did start off more as just a normal one of the people from the Limitless Nation, and a normal Native American.
Okay. So yeah, this is a cool example of the world building and stuff that as I was reading, I was like, oh, what's all that about? You know, like I want to know more. And so it's clear that Death is not getting what he wants, and this guy's not going to give it to him. So a fight's got to happen. And Hickman does a good job at, you know, this book is not an action book. You're not reading East of West because it's balls to the wall, you know, fights and action and stuff. But he does a good job keeping, you know, money scenes. You know, if this were a movie, you need those big set pieces, right? Same thing in comics. You want some of the big things, and we get this fight, and he turns into this giant bison of death. I don't even know what to call him.
Yep.
And they get in this fight. Yeah. And this was this is something you just want to read yourself. I really enjoyed that fight scene. And then this was awesome. At the end, they beat him with the help of Wolf, who unfortunately had to hurt his dad. We get this kind of touching flashback scene because this guy was the guy who trained John Freeman as well. Part of the reason why John Freeman has some of the independent ideas that he has is because of this guy. And we see Wolf, and he's like, I taught you both everything I know. And now one of you is chosen and the other is lost. Speaking to Wolf. And that was kind of a touching scene. And we can see Wolf now holding, you know, this is what I'm talking about. Like Jonathan Hickman showing his humanity. I'm like, oh, so you're not just a robot, you know, like, because when I see Jonathan Hickman, like I see him talk and stuff in real person, I'm just like, are there human emotions in there? You know, like, so yeah, we get this, and this was touching, I thought. And, Death is just like, oh, well, I'm not going to go through the whole dialogue, but he's talking to him, and in the middle of talking to him, this shot happens. You're like, what the, and I was like, what just happened? And what it is that is a bullet just passed through towards us, the viewer, you know, exploding that guy's head. And then we see the next panels, and Death looks over and he's like, no. And we zoom, and we zoom, and we zoom, we zoom, we zoom, we zoom. Keep zooming. And was God save the Republic. God help the lawless. Ejected cartridge. God damn the guilty. That's one. So there's Texas Lawman. Yeah. Which I was calling the 100-yard sniper shot. Or the 100-mile sniper shot. Like how, what the heck, dude? And look at this gun that he's got. He's just like, oh, it's the dog. I just realized that's the dog. Oh, yeah, that's his dog. Because of the whoop. Yeah. Oh.
Yep.
Just, that's one.
Good boy.
And you're just like, oh, dude. And so I thought that was super awesome, too, because when that guy gets set up, you're like, oh, this guy's kind of a badass. But I mean, how badass really is he? You know, like, oh. And this is one of those things where you feel like the pieces are all being put into play. You know,
yep.
And now we're 10 issues into this series of, I think it's 45 issues. So about roughly 1/4 of the way through. And I feel like we're just in the opening act of the big story. Oh, yeah. And I can't wait to read more. This is a weird book for me. Really, it's not a book that I would think that I would like.
Mm-hmm.
If you just kind of showed it to me, you didn't tell me, you know, like the credentials or anything. You were just like, yeah, here's what the book's about. These are these characters. I would be like, it just doesn't sound like my cup of tea. But I can't deny how good it is.
Yeah, man. Oh, yeah. It's incredible. And I love it to, and to talk about like, yeah, we really are just, almost at the first quarter of the book, roughly, like you said. And now we're at a spot where Death went and talked to the Oracle, paid a price, was given an idea of the next place where he could get his son. And he goes there, and then we have the Ranger who set off on his own thing, because Bell, kind of gave it in to Archibald, and then and when they were at the lair for Death's son, he gave a little in to Archibald, and Archibald chastised him, and then when the jig was up, Archibald rats him out, and then he's got to make a run, and when everybody's on his back, there's only one person left in the world that he really trusts at all, and it's this Ranger. And setting this Ranger off literally puts him in the crossroads and has the Ranger take out Cheveo, who was one of the chosen, take out Cheveo, but Cheveo is the one that has the information about Death's son. So now Death and the Ranger are on their own collision course now. And I love I love that that's where it ends off.
And the Ranger feels, I think the Ranger might be so far the only character of, I don't know if I want to say moral virtue, but I don't know what else to call it. Like, I feel like this is a whole world full of lost souls.
Mm-hmm.
And the Texas Lawman guy feels so far like the only one who's like, hasn't sold his soul to the devil.
Exactly. And that was something I was going to say earlier. I was like, we got the Texas Lawman. Like, not only do I like him because he is one of the good guys, but I like him because he's a well-developed character that kind of is. He really is one of the only people that hadn't, lost his soul. He, going out and taking out all the corrupt. He's almost like a bit of like a Punisher-esque type character, but just as determined but less brutal. His family's already gone. That's what that's how he knows Bell. Bell was his lawyer, as he was trying to get that get that no good dude who killed his wife and kids, get him tried. And that's kind of how they knew each other. And then and now the tables have kind of turned. Bell ended up falling prey to compromise, and now this is the position and this is the change of the relationship that he and Bell Solomon. So yeah, man, just along. This is why this is my favorite Jonathan Hickman story, because it's his larger concepts and ideas, not the most heady one, but still a good one with the world building that most people come to love from him because he sets that up. But like I said, it's also his most humanized and heartfelt story too, where the characters do feel a lot more human, and the motivations, even like we have motivations of love. Death is doing all this for love. He loved his wife and he loved his son and he loved his family, and he betrayed the other horsemen for love, and to have that. And now that something happened that we don't all know what, we've gotten flashes, but we don't completely know what, he's on this mission where he's trying to collect that again. He's trying to bring that back again. He wants to have his loving family unit back together. And then everybody else is kind of playing their role, man. Yeah, I just, and then of course, I can't talk about it enough, the Nick Dragata art. I love the imagination. The character design is very strong, and along with these very distinct characters and distinct voices, Nick did a great job of giving everybody a distinct look. And then when you go and you look at the different provinces within what's left of the US, the PRA, where the House of Mao is, where Death's wife, Zhao Lin, is very completely different from what we saw of the Kingdom of New Orleans, where John Freeman came from, which is also completely different from the more futuristic look of the Union. And that has a completely different look from like the old kind of Victorian, or whatever you want to call it, kind of French South look of the Confederacy, where Archibald is from. Like, all of them have their own distinct looks. The provinces are just as much characters as the characters themselves within this book. And shout out to Epidoxa, who is with us live in the chat, for kind of making that known. Like, the world really is its own character. And you just put all of those things together, and none of them are too heavy and none of them are too light. It is easily the most well-balanced story that Hickman has wrote. It's just, and then the dialogue from the Ranger to Archibald to John Freeman. I mean, you highlighted dialogue from just about, every, character minus some of the horsemen in the book. I mean, it all just, it ties together really well. I could have done more,
but I was like, yeah, we're already like pushing. There was so much. And that's just, that's just something to like say about this book, is that honestly, we could just do a whole show on this book alone. I didn't realize that when I was getting into it. Like, we just do the East of West show. Like, there's so much to it. And it was difficult to talk about the first volume because you're kind of thrown in on the deep end and you're like, what the heck is going on? And, I don't necessarily mind that, especially because sometimes later you go back and you reread it again, and now you understand what you're reading and like, oh, this is all great. But now that I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable, I'm treading water, so to speak. I'm really getting to enjoy what I'm seeing. And it's strange. It's just strange to me that I'm liking these characters, because I don't normally like dark. That's not true. I like dark tales. But I don't like stories about bad people, right? I don't normally like reading stories about the villain. But I feel like I can't pass judgment on this book in that aspect, because I still don't know what this book is about. In that way, it's a lot like DECORUM. I'm still not sure what DECORUM is about. Now, you have the advantage of reading the whole thing. You know how it resolves. You do know what the book's about. But right now, I'm just like, I don't know. So maybe this isn't a book about villainy. I just know these are bad people. Do things change? Do I even know what I'm seeing? Is this like a Matrix type story, right? Where you watch the Matrix for the first time, spoiler alert, it's not the real world, and when you follow Neo and he's like, he gets a phone call and you're like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? And then you go like that mind blowing moment of like, that wasn't a real world. Like, I don't think that this is the Matrix, but are we in a sort of something similar conceptually? Like, is this hell? Is this an alternate reality that wasn't supposed to exist? The book kind of hints at something like that in the beginning. I don't know, but I know I'm on for this ride, and it's gripping me, because every piece of dialogue that happens, every scene that happens, those questions that are in my mind, they're constantly like searching, like, is it giving me the answer? Nope. Okay. It's not. Okay. And it just makes me want to know more. And I do like these characters. That's something to say when you can write bad people and make me interested in them. Like, I'm also a little wary though. Like, is the rug going to be pulled out from under me?
And I was just about to say that it's not.
Because like the Texas Lawman, right? For example, I like this character so far. I don't know much about him, but so far what I know I like. But he makes this foreboding kind of comment when you get introduced to him, when he's talking to Belle, and he's like, "Look, we hung up our badges for a reason. Like, these. We knew that if we kept running around and just like killing people, like we would just become. He says we would become the thing that we hate." Right. And that's when we all knew that. And so we hung up our badges before that happened so that we didn't. Bell, he may have hung up his badge, but he became he became the thing that he hated. He basically confirms the theory to be reality. And so now when I see Bell essentially, if not literally, figuratively picking the badge up again, my mind goes, oh no, is things going to end up badly for the lawman? Like, because maybe he shouldn't have done this. Like, I don't know. I do love I love the concept of love over death. But man, that twist on the last volume where she kind of spurns him because of their kid. And I was like, oh, this isn't good. This isn't how love stories are supposed to work. His one true love's like, get the hell out of here. I hate you. Yeah. I'm like, oh no.
Well, don't forget though, she was upset with him because she was left vulnerable and because of what she had to turn into in order to survive.
Sure.
but she encouraged him to go get our son. She was just like, because of the way things have happened, I have to take over the kingdom that my father was running now. I can't just leave this kingdom. We know who has our son, or we know who's responsible for why our son is not with us. So you go find him. I am going to wage war on them from this power set. So it's almost like they're attacking it. They're both attacking who attacked them, but they can't do it together. They're doing it from two different angles. She's doing it from the political power side, and Death is doing it from the supernatural, surreal,
Sure.
side. So yeah.
And obviously, since there's so much more I haven't read, I may be misinterpreting things, or I'm falling for red herrings, or who knows. But so far, where I'm at, my takeaway is she's kind of spurned him. Like, she's been like, "Yo, you failed me. Like, I don't love you anymore," type thing. And part of my brain goes, the writer side of me goes, well, maybe this is a story of like the quest of Death to like save his son, and by saving his son, he wins her love back. And I'm like, okay, that could work. I don't necessarily. It seems a little bit too straightforward for Jonathan Hickman, but maybe it's going along lines of something like that. But then I'm like, if it does go that way, I wouldn't feel satisfied, because love doesn't falter. Love is not something that goes away. If it goes away, it was never really there. That's my belief. So I don't like a story of like, oh, I love you now that you did what I wanted. Like, okay. Like, I don't think it's going to go that way, but that's just where my brain was thinking. So I don't know. There's a lot of issues left. 25 issues still to go.
Wait, we're only at, we just finished 10, 35.
35 issues still to go. Yeah. We got quite a bit. So
plenty. Yeah, indeed. I will say this about the story. Again, part of the reason why I love it, and that's why I tell everyone, that doesn't have very much exposure to Jonathan Hickman, and they are coming from things maybe like Hawks and Pox or even Secret Wars over into this story, or even some of his other indie stuff, the Nightly News, or whatever, Black Monday Murders, whatever. This is his most straightforward story. And a lot of the times and places where you think there would be like some crazy mind-blowing twist, there are twists and things do happen, but this is way more about like the story of people being told over long periods of time. But it like no crazy rug gets pulled from under your feet. It pretty much like what you think of these characters, what you know of their character, that is who they are. Like almost none of them change, but all of them grow. But they grow into more of who they are. So, and like in knowing how the plane lands and everything, that like it is a lot closer to what you think it is. Though I don't think you. If we just from the sounds of it, from you admitting it, I don't think you know what it is, but I can tell you as you go through it, everything just keeps getting affirmed. And it's cool because there are so many characters that you won't see people for quite a while, and then they'll come back, and how they come back is connected in, some additional way. And again, they just like, they will disappoint each other in the story, but they never disappoint you, because if you have a decent, a halfway sense about who they are, that's who they continue to be. They just grow into more of that person. So it's way more straightforward. It is a lot more, like I said, heart driven. You are reading through, and I remember how I felt when I was reading through, and I remember everything that I was looking at. I was just like kind of looking, the neon lights and the colors and the characters and this or that. But you've already been told what the story's about. You've actually mentioned what the story's about. And that continues to be what the story is about all the way through. But what I'll say is, you mentioned something about love, and I agree with what you were talking about love, but I will say that that's ideally how it's supposed to be.
Well,
but we are flawed.
Right.
What were you going to say?
I was just going to say
I'll continue.
That's how that's how it is in perfection. If you could ever
right, exactly. Right. Perfection, ideal. That is what it's supposed to be. But we are flawed people who live in a flawed world. And this book is very much that. It's a bunch of massively flawed characters living in a massively flawed world, but they still have the gravity that we have to deal with in the real world. And they've all got their sins, and some are trying to do better than others. Not too many, but they are fighting through who they are and who they have to go through in order to get what it is that they want. Whatever it is that they want, that's what they're fighting through. And alliances are formed, some are split, factions, all these crazy things. But we really just do get a very firm story of all that, all the way through to 45 issues. And every bell is rung. I'll say that.
All right, man. I got to say one last thing about this book for me is what I'm appreciating about it is it's using the concept of it's somewhat using the concept of hyperbole to make a point.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
And I didn't really notice that at first until we were starting to really talk about it through this show. It sort of talking it through is making me kind of realize this, and I really like that because that's something I do when I make points. Oftentimes I'll use these extreme examples, right? That are like, okay, I know it's a ridiculous example, but the extremity makes the point hit home harder. And I think that's what Hickman seems to be doing by using this world he's created with the apocalypse and all these extreme people like the Four Horsemen, because it makes the commentary that he's putting in his story that much like hit harder. Like you're just instead of being like, hitting you with a little switch, it's hitting you with a sledgehammer, like
definitely. Yeah, for sure.
and I like that because that's what I want to be hit with a sledgehammer. What I don't like when they use a sledgehammer is to like explain their point. Like,
hey,
you don't get what I'm saying? Let me hit it you hard. Like, okay, we got it 2 pages ago. You keep explaining. He doesn't do that. He's very, very light touch on explaining what he's doing. But when he makes the point, man, it's just boom. And it's just whether or not you're paying attention. And if you are, you're like, oh, holy cow. And it's great because you can sit here and talk about it like you and I are right now, and everyone listening in, like, I can see some of the people who've read it, like Epidoxa and Jimmy, and others are just like, yeah, like they're like, they're sitting, listening and going, yeah, you totally, and that's a great thing. I wish all comics could be that way, or not just even comics, just every type of fictional medium. This is fantastic. I cannot wait. This volume was even more enjoyable to read than the first volume. Each one is wrapped up really well. I liked how both of them like ended. Like I guess like we talked about with Blade Runner, like the end of the volume felt like that was an ending point in a way. Like Hickman knew where the trade was going to be, and it's like, okay, and that's important because sometimes you don't read 10 trades in a row. Sometimes you go buy a volume of a trade. Now you got to wait till your next paycheck to get the next one. So you don't want to just stop abruptly in the middle of nothing. You want to have a nice climactic kind of breaking point. Yeah. And so when I left volume 1, I was like, oh yeah, this makes me feel like I want to read the same thing. This one. So 2 for 2, each volume has made me wanting to keep going on. I don't feel like it's a chore by any means. The chore is not to actually pick it up and blast through it. I'm forcing myself to be disciplined and only read 1 volume every 2 weeks. I want to extend this out. I want to have 5 months of 5 months of being swimming, I guess, in east of west. I don't want to just blast through it in a week and then that was fun and move on. Like this, I hope that I get to enjoy what everyone else did when they lived through it in real time. That's what
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to.
It will continue to be a pleasure, man. I'm excited that you're enjoying it as much, and I'm excited that we have some people in here that have read it. I'm hoping that people in here that haven't grab it, like Epidoxa said, savor it, savor the flavor. And yeah, you guys jump in. We're only at volume 2 now. I can tell you, um, because Hickman kind of knows how to pace dialogue really well in this. It is a very, very easy read. It's hard not to breeze through them, like the mixture of visual storytelling and storytelling via dialogue and text and narration is a very, very proper and clean and an efficient way of storytelling. So you can jump in and kind of catch up with us, no problemo. And as Ash is putting in the chat, if you have Comixology Unlimited, for the people that are listening or watching later, it's in there. Volume 3 is in there as well. So go ahead and get caught up with us. You've got 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll all be on the same page, literally, 2 weeks from now when we come back and we talk about Volume 3.
Yeah, do it. I think the show will be much more entertaining to you if you're reading the comic with us, and getting to experience it like I am. Like I love, one of the reasons I love doing the show, besides talking to Skip and you guys, is it actually kind of lights a fire on my ass to be like, read more books. And this was a book that's been, I've owned this for months. Skip remembers when I bought it, and it was like, but I kind of put it off to the side because I have so many other books, and it's when you haven't read it, you don't know what you're missing, so it's easy to be like, oh, whatever, I'll get to it, But now
Right.
I like this because it's kind of forced me to be like, oh, Ash, you got to read it for the show. So I did, and now I'm like, yes, I'm so glad, because once I get started, then it's like, oh, you can't stop me. But sometimes getting started is the hardest thing to do. So I encourage you guys, check out the books that we're reading. We won't steer you wrong. They're not bad books. I think we give you enough information to know whether or not it's going to appeal to your subjective tastes, because, you may not like Kung Fu books at all.
Right.
Like, you're just like, I hate Kung Fu with a passion. You're like, all right, that's cool. Like, but I think any of these books you read, you'll at least be able to say, hey, these are quality books. And then
Yeah.
if it also measures up to your what things you're predisposed to like, I think you won't be steered wrong.
I agree.
Jimmy wants to know if we're going to do comments from the chat.
Hey, why not? Yeah, we can do some comments. We can do some comments from the chat. We'll take about, 10 minutes, no longer than 10 minutes. We don't want to keep everyone too long. But let's see. You guys can fill it up with comments in the chat. Of course, we've already talked about a few things from Epidoxa. As you guys are kind of filling in some things for us to kind of mention, I'll roll back and talk about some of the older ones. One of the really cool things, again, Frank Martin Jr. is the one who did the colors on here, and he's one of my favorite colorists. And Maranya was in here talking about some of the different color palettes that were used. There were some in here that she enjoyed, some that she didn't. And let's see what else. We got Dominic in here too. Let's see. So far from what I'm getting with these characters in the setting is different shades of morality and being explored. As you said, there aren't that many completely good characters. And that was Dominic Powell in the chat. Yeah, we touched on that. There very much isn't. The Ranger is probably the closest thing that we have to a good character, but everyone's got their own complexities and idiosyncrasies. Everybody's got their own desires. And most of them are so engaged politically that none of them have clean hands. Once you get to that height of, whatever government, or let's not even just say government, but just politics, it takes a very strong-willed person with an extremely, grounded, moral foundation to be around so much of that different type of stuff and be able to get away with things, be able to compromise and not have done, something very terrible. Let's say Epidoxa says, East Coaster here, getting late. Thank you guys. See you in 2 weeks. I'm reading volume 3 again so I can follow along. That's my
Hey,
favorite. That's my favorite one of the night.
nice. Yeah, Epidoxa, thanks for joining us. Get some sleep. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Indeed. Let's see. A comment from Jimmy that I will not read on this one. Let's see. I can't wait for you guys to get to year 2, which is another comment from Comic Quirks for Jimmy. Yes, year 2 is coming. Actually, I think it's after volume 3. I think year 2 starts, which yeah, I'm excited for Ash to get to that one too. Some things really start kind of rolling along, especially from some of the characters from some of the parts that we have, some of the provinces in the nation that we haven't explored yet. So that would be really, really cool. As we're waiting for maybe a few more comments to come in before we go, Ash, are there any quick questions that you had that you wanted to throw out that maybe I can answer for you?
Man, I just had one that was bubbling in my head. Oh, and this may or may not be spoiler, so you may or may not be able to answer it.
Sure.
But I noticed that the 4 horsemen are named famine, death, war, and conquest, not
Yeah.
pestilence.
Right.
Is that significant, or is that just like just Hickman just doing, well, whatever? I just thought pestilence was dumb, so I changed it to conquest. Like,
I think it's a little bit of Hickman kind of doing what you're talking about, like, riding the line, but not taking exactly everything, from religious texts that people really do hold sacred. So it's kind of like he copied it and pasted it and kind of just jumbled it up a little bit, so it's not exactly that. I mean, this is an alternate history, like an alternate historical timeline within quote unquote events that happened in our real world. And I think along with that, he's altering other parts of it as well.
gotcha. Okay, that's actually really
Hmm.
cool for me.
Hmm.
I really respect that it's if it's for the purpose of being fictitious biblical apocalypse, like we're doing something that's really closely looks like a thing, but it's not really the thing. Um, that's pretty cool for me. So anyway, yeah, that was what I was like, who's Conquest? But okay, cool, good. I like that.
Indeed. All right, from Maranya in the chat here live, let's say Maranya says the art style in this series seems to be getting better the further it goes along. It definitely does not shy away from some pretty graphic elements, but still not gore for gore's sake. Coloring helps. Absolutely, I would agree. I got introduced to Nick Dragata formerly from the Fantastic Four run that Jonathan Hickman had done, and later on in the book, one of my favorite, actually it's my favorite issue from that line was Nick's first issue, and it was really cool. And if you go back and for any of you that have read that, as well as people that might go and read that, it's really cool because it's one of those things where you see an artist really grow. Like in there, Dragata is kind of known for having like a style that's like a little anime but very Kirby, and tries to pull over like very classic elements in the faces and the mouths and the way that he shapes teeth and noses and stuff like that. So to see him go from like a place where he kind of needed to stay in pocket in order to just kind of get some of those bigger gigs, to him and Hickman saying like, dude, we got to work together like beyond this FF stuff, and then they come over here and he gets to create a whole world. He's not playing in someone else's sandbox. Now he's helped craft a sandbox in a world. And it's true. Like you watch him grow like throughout the whole thing. Like it does continue to just get better and better. And yeah, Frank Martin Jr.'s colors don't hurt either. Let's see. Breen. We got Eric Breen in the chat. Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and Ric Flair. Woo! Yeah, exactly, Breen. I'm from North Carolina, just as the nature boy, Ric Flair. And when I read certain pages and when I get certain splash pages or certain dialogue from East of West, I pretty much do like an internal woo. One day I might actually blow up from not externalizing the Ric Flair woo. Let's see, Ash, is there one in there that you wanted to read?
I was actually one thing I wanted to comment on for anyone who's listening that feels like now that they've watched this and they're like, hey, I want to get into this book. This book seems right up my alley. One of the great ways to get it, I guess, affordable or your best bang for your buck would be the right way. If you're not going to do digital, if you're like, digital's not for me, they do these really beautiful hardcovers that collect the entire series into 3 volumes. Each is year 1, year 2, year 3. So you can get the first one for $35 on Amazon. And typically that's about the price if you get on sale the other ones. And each volume is about 3 or 4 of the normal trades, which are like $15 a piece. So they're really big. I have the hardcover volumes for a Descender. They're beautiful. They're oversized. Look good on your bookshelf. That's you're gonna get a ton of love, I guess. If this is something you want, this would be a great format to get. Just throwing out that option out there so you guys know it exists. But that's what I was looking at while you were reading questions.
Very well. And let's see. I think the last one really in here before we go is again our buddy Comic Quirks with Jimmy. Hickman's Fantastic Four run is too good for Marvel. It's definitely one of my favorite stories that I've read out of Marvel, especially within the 2010 to 2020 decade. It's something else. And like I put in there, they're like, volume 1 kind of blows your mind with some of the early on stuff and then laid some seeds. Volume 2 is very much kind of like a second act, if you will. Further some things along, kind of settles in a little bit more, does some setup. And then once you get past volume 2, it's like all the rest of the volumes, in my personal opinion, are all act 3. Like it just blasts off and easily, like I said, one of my favorite comics that Marvel ever published is in there. The first Nick Dragata issue with Hickman. And then 2 of my favorite scenes, I won't say who's involved with it, but 2 of my favorite scenes happen in there, and both of them were like literally perfect for the character and who the character is deep down, who the character really is. It was pretty incredible. Let's see. Okay. So Dominic Powell, I think this is this is the perfect one to end on. This goes for me and Ash. Dominic Powell asks, can you guys give us a teaser for the next episode, Ash and Skip?
Well, I can tell you that the next episode, we are going to be featuring Firepower again. The next issue of Firepower will be out. It's number 6. Hopefully you guys have jumped on this book. Absolutely.
Hope.
This is one of my favorite books that I read. And it's another one of those books that on paper I would be like, eh. And this is another book Jimmy helped contribute to me getting into. I was like, I'll just try it, whatever, just read it. I do like Robert Kirkman, and I can't even explain why. I think that's the whole point of the show. Hopefully I'll be able to talk with Skip, and he'll be able to help flesh out my mind about why I like this book so much as we sit and talk about it. But issue 6 is going to be coming out. We've already done issues 1 through 5. If you do jump on this series, by all means, get the Prelude trade paperback. 160 pages, only $10. You cannot go wrong. It's one of the best things I've read all year. I love that book. This is a fun book. Don't let it go, it's Kung Fu on comics. It's fun. It's good. And we'll keep trying to sell you on it. As for East of West, I can't give you any previews because I haven't read any further than what we did tonight. That would be in Skip's corner.
All I will say is what I said before. We have a collision course set now, and there's no stopping this train. Everything will continue to come to a heads, and there's only one person that's going to be slipping and sliding out of some of it, but everybody comes to the confrontation, and there's a lot of prices to pay.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up the show for tonight. Everyone that's here, thank you for being here. Anyone that's listening to after the live broadcast, thank you for giving us a listen and making it this far. That means a lot. We know you've got a million different places, things to listen to, and videos to watch and what have you. So the fact that you gave us your attention means the most. I think I can speak for Skip in that aspect. We just love talking about comics. We're enthusiastic about this. We love good comics. We hope you like good comics and you like talking about them. That's why you're here. So I'm going to give Skip the last word, and he's going to take us out.
Ash spoke for me perfectly. We really appreciate your time. You guys could be anywhere in the world right now, but you're here with us. We enjoy talking to comics for, between ourselves, and the more the merrier. So tell your friends 2 weeks from now, tell them what we're reading. See us back here in 2 weeks. And we'll keep this indie comic show going for y'all. You guys have a great night. Thanks for joining.
Good night.